Most people spend years trying to fix the problem in front of them, but the real root almost always goes back to a moment they can barely remember, a conclusion a child made before they were old enough to question it, and it has been quietly running their life ever since. Welcome to Breakthrough Weekly. I'm your host, Monica Pelayo. This is where we examine the subconscious patterns shaping your decisions so you can change them. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you for being back. This episode is titled The Childhood Belief That's Still Running Your Life. In this episode, we explore how a belief formed in childhood becomes the lens through which you filter everything: your relationships, your career, your sense of belonging, and what it actually takes to change it at the root. Let's begin. I recently went through a box of old family photos that had been stored away for years, and I wasn't expecting what I found in it. As I went through picture after picture from throughout the years, I started noticing the same pattern showing up over and over again. My brother next to my dad, me next to my mom, every single time. And nobody ever said anything about it out loud, and nobody ever pointed it out. But I had been feeling it for a long time. Those photos were just one more confirmation of something I had already decided was true. I heard my father say he never wanted a girl. He was upset in that moment, and I understood that even as a child. But those words landed somewhere deep and confirmed something I was already starting to feel. That was the moment the belief locked in completely. My mom separately would tell me over the years, casually and not meaning any harm, that she hadn't planned to get pregnant with me. My brother was only a few months old when it happened. Her cycle was irregular. She stopped taking birth control thinking she was already pregnant. And eventually, she was, with me. She told me this like it was a funny detail about how I came to exist, but a child doesn't hear it that way. Two parents, two separate moments, neither of them intending to cause harm, both landing in the same place. I wasn't supposed to be here. Once that belief was formed, my mind went to work collecting evidence for it. I was the one who got in trouble while my brother rarely did. In photos, it was always the same: him next to my dad, me next to my mom. The small details that nobody else noticed became proof that I noticed every single time. What I couldn't see as a child was that my brother wasn't the favorite. He was carrying his own weight too, just in a different way. He felt the pressure of having to be perfect, to be the strong one, to carry the load without complaint, to never show weakness. He had learned very early that staying quiet and staying small kept him safe. I couldn't see any of that then. All I saw was that he didn't get in trouble and I did, and my belief told me exactly why. It wasn't that I was defiant, it was that they didn't want me. And then there was one photo that stayed with me above everything else: my dad, my brother, and me, with his arm around my mother and not around me. I haven't been able to find that photo, but it has lived in my memory for years as the clearest proof I had. And that's the thing about how the mind works. Memories can feel uncertain, you can second guess them, but the memory of a photograph feels different. It feels solid, like something you can't argue with. There it is, right there. The belief didn't stay inside my home, it followed me everywhere. Outside, I became someone else entirely shy, withdrawn, hardly any friends at school. I thought people didn't like me. I thought I didn't belong, and I was so afraid of rejection that I stayed small, stayed quiet, and didn't speak up. And then I would look around and see no one reaching out, no one including me, and I would think, see, I was right. What I couldn't see was that my belief was creating the very evidence I was using to confirm it. I expected rejection, so I stayed withdrawn. Because I stayed withdrawn, people kept their distance. Because they kept their distance, I felt rejected. The belief wasn't just reading my reality, it was shaping it. I saw this play out on my own life years later when I started working directly for Intel. I went from an environment where I felt comfortable and knew everyone to a new campus where the old feeling came rushing back. I was so shy those first few weeks that I lost weight because I was too afraid to go to the cafeteria alone. I kept my head down and stayed quiet unless someone spoke to me first. I would reach out to coworkers asking if they needed help with anything, constantly overextending myself. The only way I knew how to connect was by making myself useful. The pattern followed me all the way through my years at Intel, even into my time working in the CEO's office. I didn't realize it then, but that was the belief still running everything. If I could make myself needed, I had a reason to be there. If I was helpful enough, maybe I belonged. That relationship that keeps failing, that job where you feel invisible, that constant need to prove yourself, that voice that tells you that you're not enough, that you don't belong, that no one will choose you, it did not start there. It started long before any of that, in a moment you may have not even fully remembered, with a conclusion a child made before they had the awareness to question it. In that same box, I found another photo, my dad, my brother, and me, and this time his arms were around both of us. Same childhood, same family, different picture. And as I kept going through all of the photos from throughout the years, I saw the pattern clearly, but I also saw this one moment that didn't fit the story I had been carrying for so long. For the first time I looked at that memory I had held onto for years with different eyes. Maybe I had shifted slightly before the picture was taken. Maybe it was the angle. Maybe it was just how the moment was captured. I had never once considered any of that. Because when you already believe something, you don't look for other explanations. You look for confirmation, and you find it everywhere. I want to be very clear about something. I already had done a lot of healing around this before my dad passed away, and I made peace with it. The emotional charge that used to be attached to this memory had already shifted. There was a time when that memory was vivid and very present, and I would struggle to talk about it without my voice cracking or holding back tears. Now it feels faint. There are times where I find myself struggling to remember details I used to know clearly. What once felt like it was a full color now feels like it's black and white. That is what happens when you change the meaning at the root. And that insight is something I see reflected in the work with my clients constantly. As a hypnotherapist, my work is done entirely through hypnosis, which means I work directly with the subconscious mind. This is where your belief system live, your memories, your emotions, your earliest conclusions about who you are and what you deserve, all stored at the subconscious level. This is also why traditional approaches can feel slow or incomplete. When you try to change a belief only at the conscious level, you're working on the surface, and the root is still there. Hypnosis allows us to go back to where the belief was actually formed and work with it at the same level it was created, which is why clients often tell me they're surprised by how quickly things shift. We are not managing symptoms, we are addressing the source. I don't just understand this work intellectually, I have lived it. The healing I have experienced in my own life is what drives the work I do with clients every single day. And what I have learned, both personally and professionally, is that the patterns don't change until you get to the root of where they started. My work is investigative. I take clients back to the scenes connected to their current pattern and ask a lot of questions. I want to understand what emotions were present, what meaning was being made, and what interpretation a child formed in that moment with the information they had available. And then we look at it again, this time as an adult. As a child, you have no logic, no context, no ability to fully understand adult behavior or complex situations. You interpret what happens through the only lens available to you: your age, your experience, and your limited understanding of the world. As an adult, you have something that child didn't have. You can look at the same scene and ask, is this actually what happened, or is this what I decided it meant? Once clients can see the original moment through adult eyes, the interpretation changes. The meaning shifts, and because the belief was formed through meaning, when the meaning changes, the belief loses its foundation. That is the work. The mind doesn't store reality, it stores meaning. When something happens, your brain doesn't file it away neutrally. It assigns meaning instantly based on what you already believe, what you already experience, and what it's trying to protect you from. And once that belief is in a place, it becomes a filter for everything that follows. Something worth noting is that most people who carry these beliefs never had anyone say the words out loud. My situation was different because the words were actually spoken, and in some ways that made the belief feel even more confirmed. But the majority of my clients built their belief entirely from action, patterns, and silence: a parent who was never present, discipline that felt random or unfair, basic needs that went unmet, moments of absence that a child interpreted as a meaning they didn't matter, and that the belief built entirely on the interpretation with no words ever spoken is just as deep, just as real, and just as powerful as one of the one that stated out loud. You don't need someone to say it directly, you just need a child who is trying to make sense of what is happening around them. The brain pays attention to what confirms the belief and quietly sets aside what doesn't. So you end up with years of evidence that all seems to point to the same conclusion, not because that conclusion is objectively true, but because your mind was only counting the moments that agree with it. The experience was real, the meaning was incomplete, and that incomplete meaning has been running quietly in the background ever since, shaping how you speak up or don't, how you connect with people or keep your distance, and what you reach for versus what you talk yourself out of before anyone else gets the chance to respond. So, the question worth sitting with is this: what have you decided something means that you have never actually stopped to question? Where are you still collecting evidence for a story that was written before you were old enough to write your own? What belief formed in childhood is still filtering what you see, what you feel, and how you show up today? Because the belief you are living inside of today didn't start today. It started with a moment, a pattern noticed quietly over years, words heard at the wrong time, a story told casually without knowing how it would land, and a child who had no other way to make sense of what they were feeling. That child did the best they could with what they had, but you're not that child anymore. And the beliefs they formed don't have to be ones you keep carrying. If something in this episode brought awareness to a pattern you hadn't fully seen before, take a moment to reflect on it. Awareness is where meaningful change begins. The more we understand the subconscious beliefs shaping our reactions, the more power we have to respond differently and create new outcomes. You may not be able to name the belief yet, most people can't. What you do know is that certain patterns keep repeating, certain emotions keep coming up, and something always seems to pull you back. That is not a willpower problem, that is a pattern with a root. If you're ready to find that root and do the deeper work, I offer a complimentary exploratory call where we talk about what you're experiencing and whether this work is the right fit for you. No pressure, no commitment, just an honest conversation about where you are and where you want to be. You can book that call at thethrivingpathways.com/appointment. Thank you for spending this time with me and for being part of these conversations about awareness, growth, and transformation. If this episode helped you see something more clearly, share it with someone who may benefit from hearing it. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss next week's Breakthrough Weekly. I'm Monica Pelayo. I'll see you next time.